Okay, so we know the difference between weather and climate, but what makes a climate the way it is? What are the factors affecting climate?
Number 1. Latitude. It is the most important one. It's the distance of a place from the equator.
The equator is the place where the sun shines directly, so it receives maximum heat energy. But the further we go away from the equator, the less heat we get. You see? North and south of the equator, the solar energy has to go through more of the Earth's atmosphere. This makes it weaker.
That's why it's hot nearly all the time in countries near the equator. And why it gets so cold in countries further away from the equator, like Britain. But latitude isn't the only thing that makes climate what it is. There are 4 more factors. The next one is distance from the sea.
The sea absorbs and stores heat much more than the land does. In summer, the sea warms up and stores the heat, which is slowly released during the winter. Remember how we said that Britain has a maritime climate? In other words, it's affected by the sea. The sea has the effect of evening the climate out. In summer, the sea takes the heat away. In winter, it gives it back. That's why a maritime climate is usually a mild climate. You don't get big differences in temperature, not as much as a country that's a long way from the sea.
For example, although Kiev is the same latitude as London, the temperatures are a lot more extreme because it's a long way from the sea. Let's go to the third factor affecting climate: prevailing winds. Wherever you are, the wind mainly comes from one direction. That's what we mean by prevailing winds. Well, what causes them? Basically, winds are caused by differences in air pressure.
But what's the relation between winds and climate?
Well, if the prevailing winds are blowing from the land, in other words, the wind mainly blows from the land, it will be warm in summer and cold in winter. That's because of the more extreme temperatures you get over the land, hot in summer, cold in winter. If, as in Britain, the prevailing wind comes from the sea, it will lower temperatures in summer, but raise them in winter.
So that's another reason why the climate in Britain is evened out. Number 4. Altitude. Altitude is the height of the land. Have you ever been on top of a high mountain and noticed it's a bit chillier up there?
Yes, height can have a big effect on the temperatures of a place. Temperatures can fall by 6.5 degrees centigrade for every 1,000 meters in height.
This is what happens. As you go higher, the air becomes less dense and it absorbs less heat.
That's why you often get snow on the top of mountains, even in hot countries. And there's one more factor affecting climate. Number 5. Ocean currents. The sea has currents going through it, some warm, some cold.
How do they affect climate?
Warm currents moving from the equator towards the poles warm coastal areas, particularly in winter. An example of this is the Gulf Stream, which affects the British climate.
Whereas currents moving from polar areas carry cold water south, thus causing sea fogs, particularly in summer.
In this part, we learned that there are 5 main factors affecting climate: latitude, distance from the sea, prevailing winds, altitude, and ocean currents.